It's a Friday, so let's answer some questions in the mailbag from our listeners. Next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But if you want to know a little bit more about myself, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some co-hosting, some producing, and some hosting as well from time to time, so I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. Mother's Day is right around the corner, so make sure you have your mom covered with DoorDash. Or if you're just not wanting to go out to eat one night, you just want to have everything brought to you, DoorDash is going to have you covered, and we have more on them coming up in about 15 minutes or so. Again, questions and comments can always be sent to my Twitter page, again, at JohnnyJ_15, or to the YouTube page, which we did have one question from there. If I missed anybody else in there, I do apologize. But usually the easiest way to reach me is through Twitter. So let's kick things off. We only have questions to answer today in a Mailbag Friday, so this entire episode is going to be dedicated to you guys, the listeners. First question here comes from 816 Dog. He says, can I get a shout out? Well, shout out to you. Glad you keep listening. Glad you sent in a question here on a Mailbag Friday. But your question is, if you could snag one player from any team that the Royals could have had a chance on once upon a time, who would you pick? I wish we could have snagged Gunnar Henderson. He was a second rounder. Can you imagine if we had one more solid bat? I believe we would have had 3 more wins this season, at least if we did. Yeah, missing on Gunnar Henderson, I think doesn't sting as bad as some of the first rounders because Gunnar Henderson was passed on a lot, or passed on by a lot of teams out there. Baltimore and Mike Elias, they just find ways to hit on every single player they take. It's not really Asa Lacy for me because after Asa Lacy, there were good players, but Asa Lacy was also known as the top left-handed college pitcher in the draft. I think the one I would go back to would probably be, let's see here. I want to go more so in the 2018, this current rebuild. I honestly wasn't too disappointed with going Brady Singer in 2018. The COVID year, that was Asa Lacy. Mozicato was 21. You know what? I think I'm going to go the Gavin Cross pick, even though it's still early on Gavin Cross. I believe right after Cross, Tamar Johnson went, or I want to look up that draft class quick on the fly here, just so I got my numbers correct. But Gavin Cross, to me, was somebody that I just wasn't the most excited about coming out of the draft. I thought he could profile to be a good hitter, but I just thought at that point in time, it did not feel like that was the best choice for the Royals. So they took Gavin Cross at 9. Tamar Johnson was actually 4. So in my opinion, Jace Young would have been another pick there that I would have been pretty pleased with. Dylan Lesko, if they went arm at 15, chased a ladder for Cleveland, he's going to be an absolute stud at 16. Cam Collier, I think, is who I was thinking of instead of Tamar Johnson, another high school bat there. But those were some of the guys I wanted instead of Gavin Cross. But over the last handful of years, I haven't been too disappointed with the first-round picks because hindsight's 2020. When they do struggle, you go, oh, that was a bust of a pick. But at the time, I liked a lot of the picks the Royals went with, but Gavin Cross was really one of those guys I did not. But good question there. Hope you enjoyed the shout-out there, 816 Dog, and all your 3 diehard Royals fans that you're raising over there. So keep listening, keep sending in questions. Always love to hear it and love from you guys, the fans. Next question we got here comes from Twitter. Bobbert Witt here. Why can't we hit a sack fly? Also, have you noticed Adam Frazier's face makes it look like he's a guy that hates his job but does it anyway and looks pissed off all the time, but he's chill, just looks like it. I haven't really noticed Adam Frazier's face looking pissed off. Maybe that is just his face. But I do think for the sack fly thing, that is a problem at this point in time because it's just situational hitting. You got a runner at third, get a ball in the air. If the infield is in, get one to the outfield. And the Royals are just slowly tapping the ball back to the mound or hitting it right to somebody in the infield that's drawn in. So that is more of a situational approach. I know it's easier said than done, but I would love to see that change in this Detroit series, which again begins at noon today at Comerica Park. You got a runner at third. You can't spoil that. You got to get a ball in the air. If you need to sacrifice yourself in that way, that to me is the best way to do it rather than just trying to leg out a ground ball or have the contact play on or have a squeeze bunt. Just get a ball in the air and drive in that run. This question comes from Charles. Is MacArthur's dominance sustainable, or do you think he balances out? I think going back to September, James MacArthur has shown that he's one of the better back-end guys in the American League. I think his stuff plays at this level. It's wildly impressive. I think he's got a good frame for a closer. I think he's only going to get better from here on out. And I don't think he's been dominant just yet. He's been really good. When I think dominant, I think he goes out there and he's retiring the side on 8 or 9 pitches. He's striking out the side. He's getting to that point because he's still a young pitcher, but I think it is sustainable. I think he's going to get better from this point on. I mean, what a pickup the Royals had with him last year, and now he's got his own closer's entrance, White Horse by Chris Stapleton. I remember a fan saying that Ian Kennedy used to have one. I truly can't remember it. I could be wrong on that. Ian Kennedy was a closer for 1 year, so it would have been weird to see him get that closer entrance, but James MacArthur has one. The last one I do remember was El Abayarde by Kelvin Herrera, but fun times for James MacArthur now when he enters the ninth for the Kansas City Royals. EK13 asks, should there be any concern for Nelly? He's in a mini slump and isn't hitting for power as he normally does. I am a little bit concerned about Velasquez right now. I think that he is getting into that slump where he is way too aggressive. And we saw in the Chicago series, he saw the most pitches out of the zone, and he wasn't laying off many of them. And now he's missing pitches that are down the middle. And that happens when you're in a slump. And if he was missing a lot of those pitches, but still was crushing the ball, I'd be all right with it. But he hasn't had a home run since early April, since that White Sox series, the second home series of the year it was. So I am a little bit concerned right now just because he's a hitter that doesn't have a big track record just yet. And he is in a bit of a mini slump. I think he needs one to leave the yard in this Detroit series to get back on track. This question comes from T-Less1993. When do we start looking for an outfielder who can actually hit? Well, I thought Kyle Isbell played pretty well in the Toronto series. I'm not going to take everything away from one series, but Hunter Renfroe hitting under 158 now is becoming a major black hole in that lineup. The issue is, to answer your question, there is not an option at the minor league level right now. Tyler Gentry is not hitting the ball well. Nick Lofton could take that spot, but again, I just don't see him being an everyday outfielder at this point. I think it's going to take another month or so of these guys really struggling. If you get to the end of May and Hunter Renfroe's hitting 150, I think at that point you do make the decision that he just can't be in the lineup every single day. Because at least with Isbell, he gives you the defense, and if he can have some series like he did against Toronto, I think that can be a guy that can stay a little bit longer than we all think. Next question comes from Captain Liberty. Who will we sweep in the World Series? Just to give a World Series prediction here, I'm starting to wonder if it will be the Dodgers. I was so hell-bent on it being the Dodgers from the get-go. I don't know if I see that anymore. I could see, let's see here. I could see the Phillies or the Braves getting there at this point. But no, the Royals would not be sweeping them. Again, I'm going to use the quote for John Sherman here. I want to see what a wild card team looks like first. Maybe a division winner at this point. Just getting your foot in the door of the playoffs would be exhilarating, to say the least. And I know that the question was more so of a joke, but if you want to dream, and my National League representative here, I'm going to go with the Atlanta Braves making the World Series on the National League side. Next question comes from Jacob. What do the Royals do when Carlos Hernandez gets healthy? Who do you send down, or do you stash him in Omaha? I do think when Carlos Hernandez is healthy, he will be up in Kansas City. I'd imagine if Jordan Lyles is still gone, Alec Marsh is still on the IL, it will be Will Klein. That goes back down to AAA Omaha. If Alec Marsh returns, I think Will Klein goes down, and then Hernandez would take Tyler Duffy's spot. So those are kind of the options that I think are ahead of us for the Royals. This one comes from Dynasty Lethal Protector. Can Kyle Isbell be a consistent one way or another? One day I want him off the team. The next day he amazes me in a positive way. It's exhausting. That is the type of player it feels like with Kyle Isbell. He does need some level of consistency, more so at the plate. I think he's been consistent in the field all day long. And I know your question is more so about the offense. So to me, I do feel like you just need to take Kyle Isbell for what he is. He's not a great offensive bat. He's a great defender. Don't be expecting great series at the plate from him time and time again because he hasn't shown it just yet. And until he does, you kind of have to have reserved expectations. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we've still got plenty of more questions to get into on our mailbag segment. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in DoorDash. You can get thoughtful gifts that mom deserves with the convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive to her door with DoorDash. You can shop with savings that would make her proud. With a Dash Pass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fees, apply, and those terms, again, do apply. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order and up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. And again, those terms apply. Let's get back to our questions here on Twitter. The next one comes from Brett Myers, who's the AA guy that might make it up later this year for help during a stretch run. Good question. I've wondered if it would be an arm or a bat. The bat I would be most excited to see, as you guys have known by this point, is Javier Vaz. Maybe Caden Wallace could make that jump depending if a spot would open up. But if somebody is making that jump from AA to AAA to the big leagues over the course of these next couple of months, I'd have to imagine it's a guy in the bullpen. I would have to imagine it's somebody in the rotation down there that could maybe fast track it up to the big leagues. So I'll go Mason Barnett for now. I think Mason Barnett is one of the better arms down there. I don't know if there would be a spot for the Royals, and I don't know if the Royals would rush anybody, even if they were in contention. But if I had to put a name out there, I'm going to go with Mason Barnett. Next question comes from Dave. You think Prado ever gets a real shot again with the Royals? Not sure where he'd play with Pasquatch making his plays. Yeah, the defense that we all thought Nick Prado had, Vinny Pasquantino has, and Vinny Pasquantino is a much better defender. Nick Prado, by the way, just isn't cutting it in Omaha. Strikeout numbers are still bad. His WRC plus is below league average. He's hitting near 200. He's not walking as much as we all love him to, and that was what the Royals wanted to see in the early parts of the year after spring training. It was, can you carry that over? He did for a little bit, and then it's completely fallen off at this point. I don't think I see an everyday player in Nick Prado. I'm sure he gets up to the big league level at one point this year. I just don't know if he's a mainstay in the Royals lineup, especially if they're in contention. Jeremy asks, I need to know who is going to take March's spot for a few starts. I assume Bolin, but for some reason I don't know much about him, so tell me, please. I have a feeling if the Royals don't make a roster move, because it seemed like with Matt Quatrero, they don't expect him to miss much time at all. They could do a spot start. I would say Daniel Lynch, even though he's been really bad in Omaha, might have a leg up on Jonathan Bolin. Bolin's pitching well, but I almost wonder if they want him to just build that level of consistency and then move him up at some point of the year and keep him there. Daniel Lynch could just be that one-start guy, then send him back down. Bolin, though, he debuted last year. He got sidetracked by Tommy John early on in his career. He actually threw a no-hitter, I think, in his rookie season in the professional ball level. And he's got a big frame, 6'6", 260. Good fastball, good sinker. I think good slider. He'd be fine for one start. I'd rather see Jonathan Bolin than Daniel Lynch. But if the Royals don't make a move, I could see a Johnny Holstaff start. I could see Angel Serpa going for 2, then Matt Sauer for 3, and then you're in the 6th inning and you go with your regular bullpen arms at that point. But that is game 1 in Toronto. So if they didn't want to waste the bullpen or risk Serpa and Sauer not having it and then really having to dig deep in your bullpen, I think it's going to be Jonathan Bolin or it's going to be Daniel Lynch. Next question comes from Tyrone. If you're JJ and you have a healthy Brents, Hernandez, and Lyles, who's your 8 in the pen? Well, if it were a healthy Hernandez, I'm taking Hernandez at that point over the other two options. I think I'm sticking with Matt Sauer. I think I'm sticking with Angel Serpa. I think I'm sticking with Nick Anderson, John Schreiber, Chris Stratton, James MacArthur, Hernandez. And would that leave me Will Smith? Yeah, if not Will Smith, then I go Walter Pennington down in AAA Omaha. So those would be my 8 out of the bullpen moving forward if we do get to that point. This question comes from Chiefy. Biggest worry about the Royals. I think the lack of consistency in the lineup. I think that you have the top 4 pretty solidified, but now the bottom 5 are becoming a bit of an issue. I would like to see at least one more hitter start to hit their stride, and then you have over 50% of your lineup that looks good, and then you just hope that the other 4 can give you something on a nightly basis. But right now, I just say the inconsistency with the offense. They're 16-10, so not much to complain about. But to me, that's where I think this could all collapse, is if one of those top 4 hitters or 2 of them go back to struggling, then you're seeing that offense that couldn't drive in any runs, and it's just Salvador Perez and Vinny Pasquantino that are carrying the workload. Or it'd be Garcia and Bobby Wood Jr., and the rest can't carry the workload. So hopefully one more guy can get hot and you feel good about the top 5 or top 6 in your lineup. This question comes from Casey Preds fan. Do you see Salvi keeping on his players? Is he bound to slow down before June? I mean, his pace right now is absurd. I mean, that's MVP level, and I don't see Salvador Perez winning the MVP. So he's going to regress a little bit. Do you hope that he is somewhat close to what he did in 2021, which was 48 home runs, 120 plus RBIs? He tied Vladdy Jr. for, I think, runs driven in that season. That seems like a long shot, but if he's healthy all year, what would stop him? He's got 7 bombs in April, 25 RBIs. There is going to be some regression, but you're hoping that he just stays healthy and the regression is ever so slight. So I think that Salvi can still be that guy to hit around 260, 265, run into 30 to 35 home runs, drive in 100. And that to me would be just fine. And especially the way his defenses look behind the plate, he could be turning in a career year at the age of 34. Josh asks, it's not pressing as a Bobby Wood Jr. extension, but do you think we get a Vinny extension this season or just after? If not him, who's the next young guy to get it? I do think Vinny's the next guy to get extended. I don't know if they do it in season because I feel like the Royals want to see one full great season from Vinny Pasquantino and then give him that contract. So I wouldn't expect it in the middle of the season. I would likely expect it at the end of the year, depending on how it all shakes out for the Pasquatch. This one comes from Jake. Let's suppose the Royals reach the trade deadline and are very much in the wild card discussion. What's in play? Go after a center fielder, right fielder, a little movement, or pitching? I think I've said this before about the trade deadline. If the Royals are in contention, I see a very similar approach that they had in 2013 and 2014. 2013, I think the only guy they acquired was Justin Maxwell, if I'm not mistaken. Probably another name here. Maybe Scott Downs, I think it was, and that might have been 2014 as well. 2014, remember there was Josh Willingham. They're just Jason Frazier, another one. I don't see them trading guys in their farm system that are significant to go get a big-time piece. I'd imagine if they're in the wild card contention, it's the first year of their window. They really feel like they can continue this for a while, so there's no need to empty the bank, go for broke in trying to win the World Series this year. I think that the goal is, well, you feel good about this group, let's add a couple of pieces, and probably depending on how guys are looking in the bullpen, if there's some injuries, I'd imagine bullpen help and not so much offensive help, although I could see them grabbing a bench bat to at least give some relief if they are in that wild card contention come July. This question comes from Nick. It's early, but is there any chance John Schreiber is an all-star? He's been nailed so far. Schreiber's been really, really good, but I also wonder how many Royals can they send to the all-star game? And I'm not talking about a 2015 squad that had nearly the entire infield and outfield and a couple guys in the bullpen. I think the all-star representatives right now would be Salvador Perez, Bobby Wood Jr., and that could be it. James MacArthur is going to have a run for it because he's the closer. Cole Reagans is going to have a run for it because he's one of the most talked about pitchers in all of baseball. Vinny Pasquantino is going to have a chance as well. So there are other options, which puts Schreiber a little bit on the back burner, and that's really the only thing that's holding him up. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we've still got some more questions to answer, but before we do that, let's give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, we still got about 5 to 10 more questions to get into, so let's take a quick break and come back and answer them on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the other sponsor today in FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on the app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, let's wrap up this week with some final questions from the mailbag. This one comes from Royal Blue. When will postseason tickets go on sale? I love the optimism because the vibes were low on Monday night of this week. After they had lost 3 in a row, they had lost to Toronto after another sluggish performance at the plate. It's funny how quick things can change, and I'd imagine things will change if they lose to the Tigers later on this afternoon, just with some fans, because I get that's the way it goes at this point. That if they lose, oh, they're terrible, here's why they're terrible. If they win, oh, we're excited. Postseason tickets, all of that. And I know that Royal Blue has not been a negative fan, but I know some of you out there that would probably define yourself as a negative fan, or at least one that expects a lot more than what they're showing right now. But to dream a little bit, just to put a fun spin on this, I would love if we got to September, right when, Chiefs season is getting into full swing and the Royals are still, right there in the mix of it. And when I mean in the mix of it, I mean within 3 games. If they're trailing Cleveland, or they're trailing Detroit, or they're trailing Minnesota, there are 3 games out of first place. They have a wild card spot, and we get one chaotic month. Because that's what I'd imagine, right? If you go back 10 years now, postseason tickets went on sale, I think, in September. So if you were looking to it at that point, that's, I guess, when I would expect it. This question comes from Nate. Is this going to be the best year of Salvy's career? It could be if he's healthy, because his defense has gotten so much better. It'll be tough to top the 2021 year in which he had 48 home runs, but that's just offense. He wasn't very good behind the plate. This year, he's been great at the plate and great behind the plate. That would probably lead him to the highest WAR of his career, because they value defense so much. And if you're running into 35, 40 home runs and driving in 100, it doesn't even matter if you're not taking walks, which he is taking more walks this year. I think he's got a good chance of doing so. I think the only thing that would get in his way is injury. If he can't get healthy, if he can't, bounce back from a nagging injury that would happen later on, then I think he can't have the best season of his career. But right now, it is certainly looking like he can not only break that, he can shatter his past numbers of the best season of his career. Tyler Self asked, do you think they can acquire a meaningful bat? I'd be interested in a Ryan McMahon and Garcia goes to second, or an upgrade in right or center field. I think if they were to upgrade it, be in right field. I just don't see them moving Kyle Isbell out of that spot right now. They'd probably be more inclined to move Hunter Renfroe if he keeps hitting 150 and not hitting for much power or hitting the ball hard or walking. So to me, I think if they were to add a bat at the deadline, it'd be a corner outfield bat, just replacing Hunter Renfroe with somebody else and somebody with years of control so he could stay on your team next year. I just don't know if I'd see a significant trade. I don't think I'd see a Ryan McMahon trade. They just don't have a lot to offer, and that's what it's going to come back to, unfortunately, time and time again. Jason asks, how many more complete games for Reagans this year? That is the funny thing, is Cole Reagans got a complete game because it was a 5-inning shortened game yesterday. I do wonder if Cole Reagans that type of guy to have like a complete game shutout, because here's the thing going against him. He's a strikeout pitcher. And when you're a strikeout pitcher, you're always going to have high pitch counts going into the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning. I'll throw my hat in the ring and say once. I think there'll be one outing in which that he doesn't get 8 or 9 or 10 strikeouts. It's more so like 3 to 4. He's pitching to contact against a really bad lineup. Maybe somebody like Chicago. He didn't get to face them, right? I don't think he got to face them in any of those games. At least to my knowledge, he didn't. Unless I'm blanking on something. I don't remember Cole Reagans getting a start in one of those games. Anyways, if he has, next time he faces them, That's what I would say. He gets that one complete game or complete game shutout. This question comes from Christian. Which one player in the Royals do you think will have a great game against Detroit who has recently struggled? I'm going to go. I probably can't say MJ Melendez because he's just the guy I constantly go back to. Let me say, man, it's going to be some tough arms they're facing. They get Scooble on Sunday. They get Casey Mize Saturday. They get Reese Olson today. Great question here from Kristen. I'm going to go. How about Michael Massey? Is he counted struggling? He hasn't had many games, but I feel like Massey's due for a really good series. I'd go Massey or maybe Nelson Velasquez. That's who I think is bound for a good bounce back series against Detroit. So that's who I'm going to go with. Josh asks, what do you think the primary reason is for the offense being inconsistent? And bonus question, what's your hottest take? The Royals that you feel is lukewarm, but the rest of us need a heat shield for. I love this. Love these two questions from Josh, and he does great work over at One Royal Way. Christian also does great work as well over with the Royal Reporter and Kev. So both those guys, check out their interviews. They do great work. I love catching up on all of their latest stuff. In fact, I think Kristen, Kevin, and Preston Favre, Royals Miners, they interviewed Walter Pennington not too long ago. I saw that last night, so a great interview there. Josh, though, with One Royal Way, great question here. I think the inconsistency is because they just don't have a lot of guys that have done this for a full season, or at least done it successfully at a full season. And some guys they counted on, Hunter Renfroe to bounce back, hasn't been good. And then it's kind of lopsided because the top of your lineup has been really good. Garcia's heating up a little bit more now. Bobby Witt Jr. has been great, an MVP candidate. Salvi's been an MVP candidate, and Vinny Pasquantino is starting to hit at a career level for him. So you have a top-heavy lineup and a really poor bottom half of the lineup. That needs to even out if you're going to see more consistency from this entire lineup. And the hottest take I have, man, I really want to stick my neck out here. I think, dare I say, like, James MacArthur leads the league in saves. Can I say that? I mean, it'll come down to how many close games the Royals have. It doesn't mean you have to win 120. I mean, right now, Ryan Helsley for St. Louis, and St. Louis is under 500, is one of the top guys in the league in saves. I think James MacArthur is going to lock down most nights out of the end of that bullpen. So hopefully, and he can pitch on multiple nights. So then maybe that's my hot take, or maybe it's lukewarm. I don't know if you guys need a heat shield for that, but that's what I'm going to throw out there that comes off the top of my mind. But I do love the question from Josh. And 643 Royals, he does great work giving in-game updates. If you're ever missing the game and you want to keep up on Twitter, he does a fantastic job tweeting things out. He asks, how important is it that Nelly and MJ have good offensive seasons? Could this make or break the offense? And number two, thoughts on Q so far as a manager? Do you think he leans too far analytically? For the first part, they do need to figure it out if this lineup is going to remain consistent. They cannot have MJ Melendez and Nelson Velasquez in big-time slumps because they're the 5 and 6 hole hitters. They have to give you more than what they have so far. And for Q, with Q, I like the way he's been managing. I've been a fan of Matt Quatraro. Some people don't like the way he manages. They're 16-10 and a year coming off of losing 106. They have been really competitive. This bullpen has been managed correctly, I think. I like the mixing and matching of the lineup. It may not always work out, but that's baseball. I always feel like people everywhere get mad at their manager, even if they are the best team in baseball. And right now, the Royals are doing a really good job of keeping people entertained, and Matt Quatraro is one of those reasons. Well, thank you to all that sent in the questions here on our mailbag segment. I was glad I could get every single one of them in, and we'll be doing this exactly 1 week from today. And this weekend will be a fun series in Detroit. We'll have a full recap of that on Monday, and that's where we're going to talk about it all then. But before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. We'll enjoy some afternoon Royals baseball, maybe enjoy the NFL draft a little bit later on today. But until Monday, you take it easy, Kansas City.